we call that chronic migraine. A lot of them have these headaches on a daily basis. They tend to have a lot of medical and psychiatric issues along with it: anxiety, depression, upset stomach, irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia. And these are also conditions that I talk about extensively in my book.
You're watching the Spotlight Network, starring Hollywood's newsman,
And if you were just
Logan
trying to
Crawford.
investigators, they now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're tackling one of the most common and misunderstood health problems: headaches. In his groundbreaking book, Headaches, Why You Have Them, What You Can Do About Them, Dr. Egilius Spierings breaks down the science of migraines, tension headaches, cluster headaches, and facial pain with clarity and compassion. Drawing upon decades of clinical and academic expertise, the doctor gives readers practical strategies to identify the causes, seek effective treatment, and take control of their health. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Doctor, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
I get headaches frequently. A lot of people get headaches frequently. If I don't eat, if I have a little wine, we get headaches. My answer is often Advil, which a lot of people pop. I guess it's one of the most common ailments in America, right?
I think it is. It's very common. I think headaches, as such, really are part of life. I think very much tied into fatigue as the biological trigger. But of course, a lot of things trigger headaches. Basically, anything that strains the body mentally or physically. That's usually not a problem because these headaches, and we generally refer to them as your ordinary or regular headaches, are mild. They're easily relieved with, Advil, you mentioned it yourself, or some rest relaxation. But they really become a problem when they're frequent and also when they are intense. And when they're frequent, and I think people generally don't realize that, there is often a medical reason for that. So it's important to seek medical consultation. And when they're intense, migraine is generally the culprit. And migraine is a genetically determined and inherited condition. Let me just give you a few numbers here. For example, daily headaches, believe it or not, affect as much as 5 to 6% of the population. So more than 1 out of 20 people in this world has headaches on a daily basis, not necessarily intense headaches like migraine, but still headaches on a daily basis. And as much as 15 to 20% of the population suffers from migraine with recurring intense headaches.
Migraines are sometimes accompanied by nauseousness or even vomiting. Severe head pain, is it on top of the head? Tell us the symptoms of a migraine headache.
So intense headaches like migraine tend to be located in the temple, very often on one side only, but they certainly can be on both sides as well. But the temple is a very typical location of a migraine headache, but not exclusively. They can be in the forehead, they can be in the back of the head, but I would say the temple is really the characteristic place. When they get to be more intense, very often they go into behind the eye, and people experience severe pressure behind the eye. And these headaches are so intense that, one, they make it difficult for you as a person to function. They're disabling. People cannot do what they're supposed to be doing. Very often they need to lie down, very often very still, because of the fact that these headaches are so intense also that they affect the functioning of the systems in the body. The brain gets upset, you become light, noise, sometimes smell sensitive, your stomach gets upset with nausea, vomiting, you may even experience diarrhea, you feel miserable, you look pale, if not green, and you're feeling cold, especially hands and feet. I very often, when I teach, tell fellow physicians, shake hands with the patient when you see them, not just out of politeness, but the coldness of the hand very often tells you how bad that headache is that the person comes in with.
Amazing, amazing. What are some of the most common triggers for migraines?
Um, I would say that probably the most um, potent trigger, and that's also the reason why migraine affects women 2 to 3 times more commonly than men, is the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle comes with estrogen changes in the blood, and especially when the estrogen level goes down, but also when it goes up, it triggers a migraine headache. Women, hence, very often do experience migraine headaches premenstrually, 1 or 2 days before menstruation, mid-cycle at the time of ovulation, at the tail end of menstruation as well. I would say that estrogens are probably your most potent triggers of migraine headaches, but migraine headaches can basically be triggered by anything that triggers a regular headache. For example, I see the sky below you, low barometric pressure is extremely common.
Yeah.
In practice, I can see that when I get a lot of messages from patients because they're struggling with headache. I just need to look outside and I can see the overcast sky. But you mentioned going without food too long. Fasting, for example, is a very bad trigger. But you name it, it can trigger a migraine headache, and also medical conditions. And people often don't think about these things. For example, I myself have described in the literature that you can get migraine headaches triggered from reflux or even from constipation.
Amazing.
That's kind of
What?
a distant away from the head, but it still can trigger that.
Yeah. What's happening inside your head when you have a migraine? Is it chemicals? Is it actually a physical muscular reaction? Can it be seen in brain scans?
So the mechanism that underlies headaches, whether it's a regular headache or a migraine headache, you can't visualize that in any particular way. We don't have the imaging techniques. We have great imaging techniques to look at the brain and make sure the brain is healthy. And I also tell patients, if you're concerned that you might have headaches due to a brain tumor or something like this, get imaging done because reassurance is key. You don't want to have to worry about that. And these imaging techniques are ubiquitously available, and they're not that terribly expensive either. Um, Regular headaches are probably from tightness of muscles. And I think that that is generally not from stress as people think about it, but from fatigue.
Mhm.
Fatigue means a lack of energy, and muscles need energy to relax, not to contract. That's also a common misunderstanding. So when you're tired, you lack what we call metabolic energy, your muscles stay tight, and in the head, that will easily cause you to have a mild to moderate headache, not terribly bad. When you get a migraine headache, a different kind of mechanism comes into play, which has to do with opening up of the blood vessels. These blood vessels stretching the nerve fibers that coil around them, as a result of which these nerve fibers become activated and they start to secrete chemicals around the blood vessel that make these blood vessels become inflamed. So it's really a vicious cycle of opening up of blood vessels and these blood vessels becoming highly sensitive due to inflammation that occurs. And we think that a chemical called CGRP, calcitonin gene-related peptide, is particularly important in that whole mechanism. And we have been able to develop wonderful medications on the basis of that understanding.
What type of medications are prescribed for migraines? Are they steroids?
No, when you talk about anti-inflammatory medications, people generally do not use corticosteroids because they have a lot of potentially uh, um, important side effects. People use anti-inflammatory medications like the Advil or ibuprofen that you mentioned, but I am a very, very strong proponent of using specific migraine medications. And I think that's where we have made a lot of progress over the last 30, 40 years. We have developed three classes of specific migraine medications. We have triptans, gepants, CGRP antibodies, triptans and gepants for what we call acute or abortive treatment to treat a headache when it occurs, and gepants and CGRP antibodies to prevent the occurrence of headaches over time. We used to treat headaches with medications that came from other therapeutic areas. I call them leftovers from other therapeutic areas. For example, propranolol as a blood pressure medication, amitriptyline as a depression medication, topiramate as a seizure medication. I think that time is done. We should be focusing, we should give the migraine patients out there the specific medications that we have been able to develop based on our understanding of what migraine headaches are all about.
You think you're suffering from migraines, you absolutely should see a physician because Advil generally isn't enough to keep it under control, right?
Typically, so that's also one of the characteristics of migraine headaches. If you have migraine headaches and you take even a truckload of ibuprofen or aspirin or uh,
Tylenol or
whatever other
whatever.
over-the-counter medication, it may give you some benefit, enough benefit so that your nausea may improve and you're able to function, but they don't take those headaches away to the full extent. You really need a specific medication like a triptan or a G-pen to fully relieve those headaches. And I think people really should pursue the treatment when they have these disabling headaches of the migraine condition, because suffering through these kind of intense headaches is bad for you, both physically as well as mentally. People very often think about it more in terms of disability. I think about it more in terms of health, physical and mental health. These headaches really destroy your health over time, again, medically and physically and mentally.
Yeah, and really hurt your lifestyle, your quality of life as well. If you're debilitated with a headache, you need to get care. My mom had an old school cure for her headaches, Coca-Cola and Excedrin. And she was feeling better because of all that caffeine and all that sugar. Caffeine, a good idea to take when you think you have a headache?
If you have an occasional headache, so it's an interesting combination because Excedrin also has caffeine in it. Excedrin also has aspirin in it, which is an anti-inflammatory medication. So it's the combination of caffeine with aspirin that I think makes Excedrin so popular. But and the caffeine is helpful for two reasons. One, it improves the absorption of what else you take with it, and when you um, ingest the caffeine in the form of Coca-Cola, also the carbon dioxide, the bubbles, will also improve the absorption of the medication. Uh, but caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. It narrows the widened blood vessels in the head. That's why it's so helpful. And the aspirin limits the inflammation. So it is a meaningful approach to the treatment of migraine headaches. And you can certainly do that when you have headaches occasionally, but also provided they give you full relief of headache, because that's really what I advocate for my patients. Treatment that fully relieves the headache within 2 hours of whatever you take in terms of medication, does so consistently and very importantly without side effects as well. I have zero tolerance to side effects. We have plenty of choice within the categories that we have developed, and the physicians or the healthcare practitioner involved with the patient should really put in the effort to try to find the right medication for the patient. And first of all, that's a medication that the patient tolerates without side effects. With regard to caffeine, what a lot of people don't know is that it's a relatively long-acting medication that narrows down the blood vessels. It stays in your system for 2 or 3 days. So I tell patients, if you use a caffeine-containing treatment for your migraine headaches, do not do that more than once or twice a week, but also be very careful for your stomach, because the combination of aspirin with caffeine is particularly upsetting to the stomach. And I see a lot of migraineurs who have really relied on especially caffeine-containing medications for long periods of time, have bad issues with the stomach, chronic nausea, reflux, and as I mentioned earlier, the reflux also then becomes a trigger. A lot of things in medicine and biology are vicious cycles. The headache gives you a lot of muscle tightness. You suffer through them untreated, and that muscle tightness then becomes a trigger of your headaches. You get a
Like
regular
skipping
headache
your co
initially and then a migraine.
Or like skipping your coffee. If you skip your coffee, you get a horrible headache because you're used to that caffeine every day. So it's for me, that was always a trigger. I'm completely off caffeine. I'm completely off alcohol.
All right.
And
Okay.
my headaches are much, much better. The sulfites, I didn't realize it, but for me, the sulfites in wine were giving me horrible headaches.
Yes, I think
And
alcohol in general does it, especially red wine, for example, has a lot of chemicals in it. People don't realize that as well. It's not just the alcohol, it's also the chemicals, the contaminants that are in there. Um, the nice thing about migraine is that it does tend to get better as one gets older. So that is one of the advantages of getting older when you're a migrainer, that you may ultimately be able to shed that as a horrifying problem that affects people's life to a great extent. I think a lot of us don't really realize the impact of having migraine headaches. I mean, you seem to understand that because you suffer from it yourself, and you may have
yeah, And like I
Inherited
said,
it
I
from
used
my
to get a
mother.
lot more when I was younger, and
Yes.
I'd have to lay down and sleep, and sometimes you'd wake up, you'd still have a headache. The doctor prescribed something way back when, I don't even know what it was, and it did help me. I would take one, and it kind of stopped the migraine in its tracks. So there are medications out there. There is help, as you know from, of course, from your research and your practice there in Massachusetts. Can patients contact you? Do you do televisits? Tell us a little bit about your practice.
Yes, so I am to a great extent retired, but I still go to the office and help out here in terms of managing migraine patients, and I occasionally see a patient myself as well. But people should feel free to contact me, and the best way to contact me is to go to my book's website. It's called helpforheadache.com, and you can either spell out for FOR or you can put in the number for helpforheadache.com, and that has a contact um, point. And I just received an email yesterday from somebody who suffers from chronic migraine with daily headaches post-pregnancy, and that is something that, and I just wrote to her an email, very often has a medical cause, and I was interested in getting some blood test results from her to have a look at that. But she thought it was from carrying her baby, but it's not from that. It's probably a medical issue that is underlying that. And that could be as simple as anemia or iron deficiency or low thyroid function. And again, that's also what my book is all about. I am a neurologist, but I was trained in headache management by an internist. So I have a very broad perspective on headache. And my book is really not a neurological book about headache, but really a medical book about headache. And patients who have migraine headaches frequently, we call that chronic migraine. A lot of them have these headaches on a daily basis. They tend to have a lot of medical and psychiatric issues along with it: anxiety, depression, upset stomach, irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia. And these are also conditions that I talk about extensively in my book. And I think people will find that information, I think, very helpful, because I always tell patients, when you're afflicted by those bad headaches this way, you need to continue seek appropriate medical care. You don't want to just be walking around with these headaches, taking over-the-counter medications. This is a serious problem that needs medical attention. And I wish my colleagues really would take these conditions as seriously as I think they should be taken. And I don't really always see that. So my book is not a popular book. It's written at a good level, so that I think it's also very helpful for healthcare practitioners to pick it up and work their way through it and apply the information that is in their practices.
Wonderful. I think this is a great contribution to medical literary world out there, because everybody suffers from headaches at one time or another. Like you said, a large percentage or relatively large percentage every day,
Yes.
whether it's a migraine, a tension headache, or whatever it might be. And relief is in sight. There is hope. You heard from the doctor today, there are effective treatments and there are effective testing to see what's going on inside your head. And this book is a great starting point for medical professionals, for doctors, nurse practitioners, and also for you at home, for the viewers. If you get headaches a lot, read this book. See if you recognize yourself within the pages, and then contact someone like the doctor who can help you get the help that you need. The name of the book is Headaches: Why You Have Them, What You Can Do About Them. It is a must-read for anyone seeking real answers and relief. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crawford. Thank you.
I appreciate your insight, your wisdom, and your wonderful expertise on this subject. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time, on Spotlight.